Welcome back, guys. I hope you've all had a good week and are continuing to stay safe and well. This week we have two learning intentions. The first is to learn about different specialised cells, and second is to understand the levels of organisation within a multicellular organism. So far, we've looked at the structure of the four main cell types, and if you remember, that was animal cells, plant cells, fungal cells, and bacterial. In every diagram that we've looked at, the cells are all similar looking. So every animal cell we've looked at has been circular, containing the same organelles, for example. But this isn't exactly the case. Cells are all different. We say that cells are specialised. So every cell in the body does a different job. And because they do a different job, they need to be specialised to the function that they carry out. So think of this like humans and the jobs that humans have. A builder, for example. A builder's specialised in that he's got a hard hat. This is because his job is using heavy tools on site. So the specialisation, the hard hat, aids the function, using heavy tools. Now look at a doctor. Would a hard hat be any use to a doctor? Probably not, no. Instead, a doctor is specialised in that he has a stethoscope or that he might wear a lab coat. And the reason for this is because he has to treat patients. And to finish us off here, a policeman would be useless in catching criminals if he had a stethoscope, right? So instead, he might have a stab-proof vest, a baton, handcuffs. So cells are very similar in this instance. Different cells carry out different functions, and as a result, they can look completely different. Here are just some examples of animal cells that are specialised to their function. We're going to look at some of these in more detail, but look at the differences between these and the animal cells that we've previously looked at. This cell here is a red blood cell. This is a sperm cell. It's still an animal cell, but it looks completely different. Here we have a white blood cell, and that helps to fight disease. This cell is a nerve cell. And finally, we have an egg cell. In the next few slides, we're going to look into the red blood cell, sperm cell, and the egg cell in a bit more detail. Red blood cells are a major part of our blood. Their function or their job is to carry oxygen around the body. In order to do this, they have several specialisations. They're biconcave in shape, so they look a bit different. They do not have a nucleus. And finally, they contain something called hemoglobin. All of these specialisations allow the red blood cell to carry as much oxygen as possible. We looked at sperm cells slightly in S2. Sperm cells are involved in reproduction. These are only found in males, and their primary function is to fertilise the female egg cell. In order to get to the egg cell, they need to be able to swim. So the specialisation of the sperm cell then is that it has a tail. This helps the sperm to move towards the female egg cell for fertilisation. Finally, we'll look at an egg cell. The egg cell's primary function is to develop into an embryo after fertilisation. In order to help the embryo develop, it needs energy. The egg cell contains a food store, and that can support the developing embryo with that energy. Now that we've looked at specialised cells, we can push forward. If you think of any animal on the planet, they all have one thing in common, and that's that they're classed as a multicellular organism. Now think about the name here, multicellular. Multiple cells. Multicellular organisms are organisms that are made up of more than one cell type, or more than one specialised cell. Specialisation in cells allows multicellular organisms to have specific tissues, organs, and organ systems, and this helps us to function. And these progress from the simplest point, a cell, to become more complex as organ systems. So you can see here that we go cells, tissues, organ, and organ system. This diagram might be familiar from S2. It illustrates the progression of cells joining together to form tissues. These tissues then work together to form an organ, and finally, multiple organs can work together, becoming an organ system. So think about cells. Cells are the most basic unit of life. Remember that a specialised cell is specialised to a particular function. When cells with a similar structure and function join together, they form something called a tissue. This could be anything from brain tissue to liver, lung, or heart tissue. We can see examples of different tissues in this diagram. Each tissue is made up of different cell types in order to serve a particular function. They all look slightly different to each other, don't they? When different forms of tissue then join together, they make an organ. This is the part that you will be most familiar with. Think about the heart, the lungs, the liver, kidneys. Finally, when different organs work together to do a specific job, we call this an organ system. And I'm sure you could name them if you were to think about it. Here are some examples of these organ systems. We'll look at these in more detail as we progress through the year. You've got the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, the respiratory system, the digestive system, the skeletal system, and finally the muscular system. All of these involve different organs, and each system carries out a different function. Here we have a summary of what we call this order of life, looking at how cells progress up into organ systems. To recap this, we've said that cells join together to form tissue. Multiple tissues join together to form an organ. And finally, multiple organs work together to complete a specific job in an organ system. And we can see this illustrated here in the heart. Heart cells join together, and that forms heart muscle. And in this instance, heart muscle is the tissue. The heart muscle then joins together to become the heart. And finally, the heart works with different parts of the body to form what we know as the cardiovascular system. So, to recap this week we've looked into specialised cells and have learned that each cell is specialised to a particular function. We've looked in more detail at the red blood cell, sperm cell, and egg cell. We then moved on to learn about multicellular organisms, understanding that a multicellular organism is one that is Now that we've went through the PowerPoint, these are the revision tools that I'm advising that you use this week. The revision notes can be found in this week's assignment on Teams, and if you look at page 2, this gives you all the information that you'll need this week. You can also have a look at BBC Bite Size for additional help. Now there's lots of links for Bite Size this week, so I've attached them into the assignment as well. And as usual, this week we have 2 assessment material for you to complete. The first are revision questions for you to download and complete. If you cannot complete them online or on Word, just write them onto a sheet of paper and email them to me. The second is a quiz on Teams. Once you've completed this, you must submit it. This will show us that you have completed the task. Remember that as always, the quiz won't be posted until Thursday. It'll be due for completion by the end of the day on Friday. Please let me know if you have any trouble accessing documents in Teams or if you need any extra help. And once again, thank you for listening. Have a good week.